Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America, where each episode we bring you a brand new interview with one of the film industry's top directors, conducted by one of their peers. Remember to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're enjoying The Director's Cut, please take a moment to rate and review us on iTunes or like us on SoundCloud. We love hearing your feedback. This episode takes us behind the scenes of director James Franco's new biographical comedy drama, The Disaster Artist, which dramatizes the making of writer-director Tommy Wiseau's The Room, one of the most infamous films in Hollywood history that is often referred to as the Citizen Kane of bad movies. The Disaster Artist charts the film's strange beginnings through its odd and troubled development and release, into its eventual status as a hit cult feature. In addition to The Disaster Artist, Mr. Franco's credits include the feature films In Dubious Battle, The Sound and the Fury, Bukowski, and As I Lay Dying, and episodes of the series The Deuce and Making a Scene with James Franco. Following a recent screening of the film at the DGA Theater in New York, Mr. Franco spoke with director Paul Haggis about filming The Disaster Artist. During their conversation, Mr. Franco discusses what drew him to adapt the book about the beleaguered production of The Room, how he juggled playing such an enigmatic character while also directing the film, and how the Tommy Wiseau cameo came together.
Hello.
Man, I have pages of notes here, but mostly what they just keep saying is, what the fuck? You know, that's rhetorical. You don't need to answer it. So this is, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first time you'd worked with Seth since you'd brought down a major studio? Was that the first?
I think so.
Yeah. Was that his idea or
actually,
yours? Yeah.
I read the book,
Yeah.
The Disaster Artist, while we were making the interview.
Okay.
So we were in Vancouver,
Yeah.
and I had not seen The Room.
But you've seen the posters all over, the billboards.
Yeah.
Actually, it was a singular billboard, wasn't it? How many billboards were there in?
There might have been more, yeah.
Just
Like,
the
I
one.
think, I mean, it was all on Tommy's dime. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's definitely the one on Highland.
Yeah.
And then I think for a while there was even like one on Sunset or whatever. But yeah, you remember those,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And you
no
knew
idea
you
what it
knew it
was.
was a movie.
No, I had no fucking idea, man.
Yeah.
It said The Room.
It's like
and
a
there
wanted poster
It was
or
like a
something.
phone number or something on it. It was like really weird.
Look.
But you figure it was some like, Angelique or something like that.
Angeline,
yeah.
who's in the thing, like,
Yeah.
because she had one not far away on Sunset for a while with
Yeah.
the Corvette, and there was a number,
Yeah.
and I knew who she was because you'd see her
Yeah.
driving around in the pink Corvette. So I either thought like call that number and you can get a vampire in your movie,
Yeah.
or it was a cult, or I don't
Yeah.
know. But yeah, that's all I knew, and
So who sent you the book? How did you get the book?
I read it right when it came out. It was in the New York Times book review, and someone was like, "Hey, I know you like Hollywood stories. Like,
Yeah.
this looks really good." And I got it immediately. And yeah, before I was halfway through, we went to a screening. I was like, "This is an amazing story.
Yeah.
I got to see this thing." And we went to a screening in Vancouver, and like Canadians, they do it right. Like that, I've been to many screenings of The Room since then, and
Yeah.
they had more spoon, like they throw spoons. I don't know. How many people have seen The Room? Okay. Yeah. They had more spoons in Vancouver, better callback lines, more footballs,
Wow.
everything. And I met Greg Sestero that night. He was promoting his book, and I just said, I got to do this thing. Yeah. And then I gave it to the book to Seth.
Yeah.
And because I had made quite a few sort of literary indie movies.
Yeah, you just do Faulkner over and over again.
Yeah, and I did a couple Faulkners, one Cormac McCarthy,
Yeah,
and
it's true.
Steinbeck, and I just thought, all right, this has enough weirdness that it's like it'll appeal to me, but Seth, you know how to work with studios and still make the movies you want to make.
Yeah.
Help and so yeah.
Now, was it the I mean, it's probably a hard question, but was it the character the character you wanted to play, or a story you wanted to tell?
It was both. Like when you get, something like a story or a piece of source material, like often there's a few things that just come to mind, right? There's like a scene or something, with a sequence that you're just like, oh, I got to do that. It's just the seed, and it builds from there. There's a whole thing, but it's like there's a few images sometimes that you get, and I thought, yeah, I want to tell this story. I understand this story strangely, like underneath all the insanity and how bizarre he is. It's really just a Hollywood story of two dreamers that are outsiders, and they come to follow their dreams. Like
So you identified with that.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think most people that come to Hollywood do, right? Like, I mean, when I know of your story, yeah, you were, a young man in Hollywood, and you're just like, how do I get into this thing, right? And it's like, you got the passion, but like, it's a tricky thing. It's the story of any artist, who am I? What do I want to do? How do I do it? How do I do this thing? Who do I do it with? And all those things are there. It's just through the upside down, cracked lens of these bizarre characters, And so part of me thought this appeals to me. When some of my favorite movies are movies about artists or the creative process and that kind of thing. And this would have all that. It would just be sort of the upside down kind of version.
The movie at one point breaks your heart. It broke mine.
Yeah.
And did the book do that to you?
For sure. I mean, my friend Chris Bauer, who's on the Deuce with me, watched it, and he was like, "Oh my God, that was crazy." I identified so much, but it's also like identifying with this version of the Hollywood story is like, he said, it's like trying to catch a cold on purpose, like that, like because you identify and you sympathize, but it's also on another level, it's sad. I don't know, the end for me, the ending was always like, it's a success story, but it's also ironic and sad and weird. Like he then has to rewrite history and take credit for it being a comedy, which will give him everything that he sort of wanted, a community and friends and all of this stuff. And on the other hand, he intended to make, great drama.
You told me he went on after this, Tommy did, and tried to make several other films, right?
Well, that's the ongoing saga of Tommy Wiseau is wild and weird. And there's a Tommy before The Room and the Tommy after The Room. He's the great rewriter of history, right? He intended it to be comedy. When it first came out, he wrote on the billboard or on the poster, Tennessee Williams level drama, right? So that's what he intended. And he
did he quote himself, or did he just
What's that?
He didn't actually quote himself on that.
Oh, and then there were a couple of reviews from sources that I don't think have been on any other poster, like, I don't know, Beverly Hills 90210 or something like that. And it said, and he had obviously written them, Tommy Wiseau, the Raging Cajun, delivers like a power punch, something like that. And and then it cost $6 million. It made $1,800 when it came out. He kept it in the theater on his own dime to qualify for the Academy Award. So it all that says, like, he intended to make this great drama. Came out, people laughed at it. But unlike, some of these other people that have these movies like Troll 2, where it became a cult hit because it's so bad, and the director sort of rejected that and like said, well, screw you, you don't understand my movie, you're laughing at my movie. Tommy capitalized on that and then said, well, I intend that, right? And now he says about The Room, Room is a safe place. You can laugh, you can cry, do whatever you like, express yourself, just don't hurt yourself, right? So as a actor and director, I couldn't really go to him as a source, like to ask him what he was like, before, because I'll get nothing. Like, yeah, I intended, and so, but Greg Sestero, the other actor, had stolen these tapes. Tommy used to record himself doing everything. He'd drive around in his car and talk to himself about everything, acting teachers and, everything. And it was like having his journal or something. He knows I have the tapes now. He calls them secret tape. I know you have a secret tape. But they were like from, 20 years ago, 5 years before he made The Room. And it was just, as an actor, it was incredible. Not only could I hear the voice, repeat the voice, listen to the voice, it was his inner life, his inner monologue. And, this teacher, he don't understand me, whatever, he treat me different than the other students. I think he sensed my power and he intimidated. You know what I mean? And it's like that's how his mind worked.
And Greg actually seems to have been, sensed his power and was intimidated at the first scene. You go, Greg senses something there.
Right. Yeah. Well, you can see that it's like, it's funny. Greg Sestero, the real one, said something to me. He's like, right before we started, he's like, you met Seth Rogen when you were about 20, when you guys were doing Freaks and Geeks, and then you've gone on to work together for almost 20 years. And then I met this guy, Tommy, when I was 20. Wow, that happened. And but as far as so I was very grateful at that moment. But what happened is Tommy took on that persona that he thought everybody wanted him to be. The funny, wacky, weird Tommy. When he was making the movie, he threw his heart and soul into it. And so now he can sort of never repeat The Room, because now he's trying to be funny, which is weird. On the other hand, and so this new stuff that he's made is just like, and he makes you watch it. Like we did all the behind the scenes stuff here. Like we shot that the day before principal production. We went to our screening of The Room. It was supposed to start at midnight in Westwood. It didn't start until The Room didn't start till 2:30 a.m. Like he comes out and sells his underwear. He's got Wiseau underwear. So that's one thing that he's doing now. And it says Wiseau in huge letters there, and he puts it on guys in the lobby, and then they come out on stage and model the underwear, and then he'll do and then he makes you watch his other stuff, Neighbors, which is a show, but you don't just watch one episode. He makes you watch like all the episodes, and it's just like. Yeah. Anyway,
does he also show up at like Q&As unannounced or anything like that?
No, he makes sure but it's the amazing thing about it though, like where he was so unaware and so he lacked so much self-awareness when he was making The Room, right? He thought it was James Dean, right? Yeah. And he's quoting James Dean in the thing. When he realized that there was, an audience for the movie when, they were having fun with it, he became like a maestro of self-promotion and selling this thing. And he's got the savvy of a Kardashian to capitalize on, what people want. He knows what they want. And he goes to these things. And what I like about it is it's not cruel. I've come across people that are like, yeah, I'm not into the laughing at the thing, it's so bad kind of thing. And I'm like, it's not quite like that. When you go to these screenings, it's very communal. When Tommy shows up, people are so excited to see him. And it's a different kind of thing. Yeah, and he got everything that he kind of wanted in that sense. Greg, on the other hand, who you think like would run a million miles away from this whole thing, wrote the book, and I can understand that because at a certain point, Greg,
great story,
at a certain point, it was a great story, but also Greg knew that The Room was not a good movie, and so he probably thought, well, at least nobody will ever see it, right? But 14 and a half years later, it's still playing in all the theaters, and it's what Greg Sestero is known for, and so he had to kind of take some ownership back. Okay, makes sense, and he wrote a great book with Tom Bissell and got his story out and his version out, which is good for him. But he saw an early screening of our movie.
I was going to ask.
Yeah. And he said that I rehumanized Tommy for him, and he took a week and wrote a whole feature-length screenplay called Best Friends, with the R in parentheses, so it's Best Friends, Best Fiends. And it's this movie for he and Tommy to star in, and they shot it. It was so long they had to kill bill it, so it's Volume 1, Volume 2, Best Fiends, and it's coming out. And then they they asked me to be in it, and for a second I was like, maybe, and then I was like, you know what, I can't keep going down this rabbit hole with these guys. But they consider, they're like, yeah, we consider it the third part of the Room trilogy. And Seth and I got this email. We're like, the third part? What's the second part? And they're like, yeah, your movie's the second part in the Room trilogy. We're like, oh, okay. We didn't. Yeah. So.
Well, it's a staggeringly good performance. How did you? I mean, you go there.
Yeah.
You fucking go there. How were you brave enough to do that when you're actually directing as well? Was Seth out there often to say, "Whoa, just a second, you got to pull this back in or something"?
You're right. You're onto something.
Finally,
I've directed myself a lot.
Yeah.
The key to that is strong producers, great producers that you trust. So I direct myself on the Deuce with David Simon and that gang, and I don't want to, have to go back and forth to the monitor all the time. You know what I mean? And so when you're in sync with producers like that, and with Seth and Point Grey and all that, it's a very kind of fluid thing. They know what I'm going for, and we've worked together for almost 20 years, and so. On those sets, and it was really a dynamic that was established by Judd Apatow, where I remember not quite on Freaks and Geeks, but by the time he did 40-Year-Old Virgin and Knocked Up, he'd always have writers behind him that were writing alt jokes and alt lines. Wow. And so Judd could throw out suggestions, the actors were free to try things, and then these writers, who in those early days were Seth and Evan Goldberg, everybody could contribute, and it was like sort of an open dialogue, and you had people, granted, you had people there that got it and were good, and everybody that's contributing is solid. But it's sort of this open, collaborative thing. But it was also the perfect apprenticeship, kind of program, where then when Seth and Evan went to direct This Is the End, they had been on a number of sets right behind, Judd. And then I had worked with them in that, on those films. And so then when I was the director and they were the producers, it was just sort of, it felt very familiar, and and sort of, it's a little bit musical cherry kind of thing. And
obviously the last scene's improvised, right? The scene with
Tommy. Oh, yeah. That's a whole story itself. Yes, it's
how did
improvised.
that come about?
Let's see. I had to get Tommy's life rights. Yeah. It was surprisingly easy. It turns out, he wanted me. I was his second choice. He wanted Johnny Depp to play him, but after Johnny, of all the actors, I was the one that he was thinking of, but I had approached him. So it was, in a weird way, it was almost like we were meant for each other. So he's like, okay, James, I've seen your stuff. You do some good things, you do some bad things, and and I was like, okay, and so. Anyway, I got this.
So he wasn't overly impressed.
I don't know, but I had played James Dean, and Greg told me later that he had watched my version of James Dean many times. So I think that was something that had something to do with it. And so, but his big contract point was that he have a scene in the movie. He didn't read his contract very well, and it just said we had to shoot it. It didn't say we had to put it in the movie. Yeah. Now later. He came out and said, well, no, there were two contracts. It's like, I don't think it works that way, Tommy. Like the point of a contract is sort of like everybody agree and like, no, 2 contract. One say I have to be in a movie. We're like, no, it doesn't work that way. But anyway, when we're and look, I wanted him in it. Like I thought it would be a cool thing, you know, a kind of Hitchcockian nod or whatever. But in the background, you know what I mean? Not like you know, front and center. And he kept insisting, no, it has to be seen with James, opposite James. And I had heard the tapes, right? In those early recordings. Yes. One of those tapes was Tommy with his dialect coach. So I'd heard him trying to get rid of that dialect and failing miserably, you know, like, Tommy, don't roll your R. No, okay, don't roll R. Got it. Okay, all right. And it's like, so I knew I mean, everybody knew, but like I knew especially like this guy can't play anything other than himself. And like I'm like, Tommy, it's not going to make sense. I'm playing you. It's not that kind of movie. And he's like, no, I have to be with James, you know, in contract. So we were like, all right, well, we can't give him like an important part or even like a doorman or something that we can't cut around.
Throw you out of the movie, exactly. Yeah.
And so there was a scene that sort of got cut up, but I'm at a birthday party, and my Tommy is upset because he realized that Greg has all these friends, and Tommy's only friend is Greg. So he's in the corner by the food pouting. And then this other character is going to come up and talk to him. Tommy said, well, I want my character to be named Hanray. And we're like, okay, you can be Hanray. Fine. And then 3 days before, you know, I'm sure you get this all the time from actors. 3 days before he sends me this text, and he's obviously in lens crafters, and there's glasses, all the glasses on the wall behind him, and he's got these big glasses on, and he's like, what you think of glasses? They're good for character? I'm like, yeah, they're fine, Tommy. Fine for Hanray. They're good. And he had drawn on a mustache with big pen in this photo and a little soul patch, and he says, yeah, if you like mustache, I draw it on better when we shoot. And I'm like, dude, what kind of movie do you think this is? I'll get you a mustache. Okay, I'll get you a mustache. He shows up, and we hadn't dealt with him that much. We didn't know what he was going to be like. He turned out he was actually incredibly sweet. He won us all over. We really liked him. But okay, we go to do the scene, and it was this bizarre thing, and like it doesn't quite play in the scene, but I'm acting with him. Yeah. Video Village is over there. Seth and everybody are over there watching the monitor. So I see him out of my corner of my eye. He's improvising, and he's like smelling the little baby carrots and stuff. Just weird. And then he sort of gets all coy, and he goes, so we go? And I'm like, go where? He's like, back to my place, right? Everybody in Philly, like, oh my God. Because he's hitting on me, but he's not just hitting on me, he's hitting on himself. Yes, it was like ultimate, like, you know, narcissist dream or whatever.
Narcissism squared, exactly, yes.
And anyway, we shot the scene. My editor put it in the first assemblage, and we're like, all right. You know, she and I were the only ones that watched it. We're like, okay, haha, get that out of there. Yeah. But we had recreated the room scenes for the premiere scene in the thing. We needed something up on the screen, right? But we were so proud of our recreations. We were like, well, we got to do a side-by-side. Like, that wasn't the original plan. Right. We're like, we'll put them in the credits. It'll be great, right? But we hadn't negotiated for the room footage. And so we went back to Tommy, and we're like, we need, you know, these scenes. And he's like, he asked somebody, I don't know who told, but he's like, so how am I seen in there? Like, it ain't in there. Yeah. And he's like, you want my footage? So you have to put my scene in the movie. And for a second, we're like, no, this guy, we didn't think he would, like, you know, get his fingerprints on a thing. But in the end, we're like, oh, we can put it at the end like a Marvel tag. Yeah. It'll be perfect. Yeah. Super fans will love it. And it worked out.
Now, had you worked with your brother before, with Dave?
Not to this extent. Like he, like I said,
how'd you decide to cast him?
Yeah, I wanted. I love him. I think he's just a great actor. I've always wanted to work with him. I've asked him to work with me many times, and
he's
he
turned
said
you
no.
down.
He said no.
I love that.
Now, everybody, like I was saying before, everybody has their sort of story of struggle, or coming to Hollywood or whatever. You think with him, like, yeah, your brother was on Freaks and Geeks when you were actually in high school. Like, you didn't have it hard, and his story was like, well, I came to Hollywood, and then I was James Franco's little brother. And so for a long time, he just wanted to separate himself from me. And so that's why he said no to some of them. Others were just too weird for him. And he's like, I don't want to be in Cormac McCarthy necrophilia movie or whatever. So, but this one, I read it. And so the three things I thought were, I want to tell the story. I know, as weird as Tommy is, I get it. I feel like I can get in there as an actor. And I know that I have the right dynamic with my brother. One of the, because the bond was, very close between those guys. Yeah. But also, one of the things that we had done, the few things that we had done, were a series of videos for Funny or Die, where I play a ridiculous, over-the-top acting coach, and he plays my student. And he looks at me, like I'm an idiot. And it was sort of it was the seed of the dynamic for Tommy and Greg. And so I just knew that we'd be right, and he'd be right. And
I'm sorry, and went back to the other question. So the end was improvised. Were many of the scenes when you got there, did you improvise them with him? Or did you pretty much stick to the
script?
A
certain extent. I mean, the writers were there. Newstead and Weber were there every day. Yeah. And we had other writers and then the Point Grey, the producer, Seth and his company. And so there were times, when we would go in, we would do the thing and the improvisation, but we did have as opposed to like Pineapple Express where there was no source, like we had a great source and we knew we were telling this story. So like it was a different kind of improvisation where it was like I had listened to those tapes. I listened to them every morning when I was, it's 2.5 hours of.
So you were channeling him more than
prosthetics.
Yeah.
Well, I had to get down. I had to sort of ingrain the Tommyisms, like for your information, not your 5 cents, this real American movie, all those things that he would say, so that when I was improvising, that kind of stuff would come out. It wouldn't just be James improvising; it was filtered through Tommy. Yeah.
Should we ask some questions and get some questions from the audience? Should we do that? Anybody? Parallels with Tiny Tim.
I know who Tiny Tim is. I know what he looks like. I don't know his story. My guess is Tommy, like, you're talking about, like, just aesthetically, like his style. There's some similarities. I think Tommy's influences are more like pirate, vampires, and like Michael Jackson, I think, actually. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, what makes it endemic?
I really think the secret sauce is the heart that Tommy put into that movie. He was swinging for the fences, right? The fact that he kept it in the theaters for 2 weeks to qualify for the Oscars. That he would say about it, this movie, when they watch it, people will not be able to sleep for 2 weeks after watching this movie. That's what he thought he was doing, and another thing, that we kind of touch on in our movie, Tommy does sort of hit a bottom. Judd Apatow tells him, like, you're never going to make it, and, basically his dreams are crushed. And that's when he makes the turn to make his own movie. In the book, it goes even a little darker where Tommy is maybe even suicidal and was leaving these messages on Greg's machine, like, I don't want to live, but I believe in God. And, it was really dark. And then he showed up with this script, The Room. And in The Room, if you know The Room, he commits suicide at the end of the movie. And in a way, I look at that and it's so moving because he's doing what every artist does, right? He's channeling his life and his pain into the work. But it's also like the room just wasn't just like fulfilling his dream. It actually, in that sense, kind of saved his life, and so all that's underneath. I think, and you can see that when you watch the room, you're like, wow, that guy's really trying hard. You just know it. He's not trying to be silly, as despite what he says now. And there's something about the persona that he's taken on now, this sort of affable arrogance. I don't know this, but I feel like that is so key. It's a gift that Tommy gives because it gives you permission to laugh, and it's not cruel because he's basically saying it's okay. There's there's this movie that Jimmy Kimmel produced called Windy City Heat. Do you know that one? No. It's a whole other thing where there's this guy, Scary Perry, who was on the comedy circuit in Chicago, and he was really bad, but he is so arrogant. And these guys, I think his name's Don Barris, and these other comedians would mess with him for years and years, and then they did this whole thing where they created this fake movie, and they're like, Perry, come out to, you got to audition for it. You're up against De Niro and these other guys, but I think you got a good shot. And they go through this whole thing, and Bobcat Goldthwait and all is the director, and all. And they put on this whole thing. It's amazing and incredibly funny. Its premise feels very cruel, but the guy is so arrogant, and he's like such, he's like blatantly like homophobic and everything, and so it's like it's okay to laugh at him, you know what I mean? And it's just plain funny, but like there's something about that with Tommy where he actually is a really sweet guy, but the way that he takes credit for it and says, I'm greatest director and whatever, like he'll do, at the beginning of The Room, the greatest thing that he made since The Room is this little thing he puts in front where it's like, there's all these sayings, like all the criticism that he's ever received, and then it's always, each line ends with like this explosion, and it says, shame on you. So it's like, you say I don't intend it to be comedy, shame on you. You say I don't have script, shame on you. You say, like that kind of stuff. Like, actually, what's happening is you're like, this guy is so ridiculous, but like I kind of like him, and it's okay to laugh at him because he's sort of in on the joke and sort of not. And then I think, sorry for it's just such a long answer, but I think there's also something like, isn't like one of the concepts of comedy like, why do we laugh at somebody slipping on a banana peel? Because it's not us. You know what I mean? There's something to that where it's like, everybody has dreams, everybody, and this guy swung so hard. And it is like, there is like like he spent his own money and all this stuff. Like there is, this arrogance, and that he's falling so hard on, on his face, that there's something to that too. But there's then the flip, the magic, where it's not just cruel. It's like, it's a fun place to be. It's not, you don't feel nasty when you go and laugh at The Room.
Yeah, it's like some of the comedy, early comedy, there's an arrogance to it as well. You see the banana peel, you step over it. I'm smarter than that, right? And you go, you turn back, and then you fall. But if not for the arrogance in the beginning, it wouldn't be funny. Yeah, when I'm smarter.
It's almost like he slips on it, and he's like, yeah, I intend to do that, okay?
Yeah. I was selling banana slips. Another question, yes. Yeah, did he hate any part of the movie?
Okay. No. I have a couple stories. So he didn't want to watch it alone. We offered to screen it for him in private, and he's like, "No, I want to wait." So he waited until we showed it at South by Southwest with over 1,000 people.
Oh wow!
And so he's sitting there in the theater. Everybody knows he's there. he's wearing his shades in the theater watching the movie. And fortunately, it was the first, public screening we did, and fortunately, it was an amazing screening, and people were laughing and standing ovation and everything. But we kept looking over at Tommy, like down the row, like, what does he think? What does he think? And he wasn't laughing. Like, he just kept whispering to Greg, I found out later he was saying, like, did that happen? I can't remember. Did that happen? Like, and so anyway, we go do the Q&A, I step off stage. Well, there was this whole thing where we were like, oh, we can't bring him up on stage, like, because he said about the book, famously, like, he's like, yeah, the book only 40% true. And we're like, well, we based the movie on the book, so, you might not like the movie. And we didn't want to have, like, such a great screening and then bring him up and him say, like, yeah, the movie bullshit or whatever. So, but the audience was doing Q&A and asking questions, and this guy came up and he goes, oh, by the way, I played Chris R. in The Room, the Zac Efron character. And can I take a picture? And Seth Rogen's like, yeah, come on up. So he gets up on stage. I look out in the audience, and Tommy's like 15 rows back, but I can just feel like there's a dark cloud, like, descending. And I don't know if it's that he's jealous that the guy's on the stage or he just hated the movie or what. So I'm like, all right, Tommy, come on up. And he won't come. And the whole audience then stood up and started chanting his name, and so he came. That's what he wanted. But he comes up, and we still don't give him the mic. It was my biggest regret that I didn't give him the mic. I step off stage, and I'm like, all right, what do you think? And he's like, yeah, I approve 99.9%. And I'm like, and I was like, oh, thank God, I wish I'd given you the mic. And I was like, so what's the 0.1%? And he goes, and you think he's gonna be like, well, that didn't happen or whatever. He goes, and it's like, I realize it's like director to director talk, and he goes, I think you should look at lighting in the beginning of your film a little off. And I'm like, and I did, but I only realized months later. I was like, you're wearing your fucking shades during the whole thing, like, and
little underexposed, exactly, yeah. Exactly.
And then later, and this shows like what a great rewriter of history is. I told that story a few times, and then I didn't see him for months, and then we go to Toronto. First thing he says to me, he goes, I hear that, yeah, the 99.9% story. It's true, but I never say the lighting. I'm like, Tommy, I didn't make that up. He's like, no, because the way you throw football. And I'm like, oh, because you're all American guy, and you throw football really well. He's like, yeah. And so anyway, and then the last part was finally the third time he saw it was at the premiere in LA at the Chinese Theater. What was so amazing about that night was when he had premiered his movie 14 and a half years before, it wasn't at the Chinese Theater. Yeah. But it was at a little theater on Beverly and Fairfax that is closed. But he had showed up at the Chinese Theater in his white stretch limo. He had made all these T-shirts that said The Room, and he popped up out of the sunroof and threw the T-shirts at everybody that was waiting in front of the Chinese theater. And he's like, "Don't go see that movie." I think it was like Memento or something. Don't go see that movie. Come see my movie. And so there we were, 14 and a half years later. And I walked in with Greg and Tommy and my arms around him, and I was like, what do you, here we are, guys, 14 and a half years later, like, what are you thinking? And Tommy goes, you don't want to know what's in my mind. I'm like, no, I do. I really want to know what you're thinking. He goes, naked at beach. I'm like, what? Naked at the beach? Yeah, ha 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 ha. I'm like, all right. I didn't want to know that. And
he was right.
Yeah,
exactly.
I don't know if that's like, what is that? Like, that's what he's thinking. Like, that's how he gets over his nerves, or like, I don't know what. But or we're naked at the beach. I don't know. And So then, but then like a week later, we were doing press. And after press, Greg texted me and was like, "Hey, Tommy and I are at Cantor's Deli," which is, where we shot the scene where they read the script, and that's where they actually hung out. And he's like, "We're at Cantor's. We've got the same waiter circa early 2000s that used to serve us. You should come and surprise Tommy." And I was like, "Okay." So I show up, and I call it like Honest Tommy Day. So first he says, and he wasn't wearing the shades, so I could look in his eyes, and he's like, unprompted, he's like, "James, the room is not exactly how I intended." And I was like, "Whoa, wow, you're admitting it?" And he's like, "Yeah, but people react to it, and they get something from it, and that's all you can hope for, with movie." And I was like, "Wow, that's cool." And he goes, "And I watched your movie, for a third time at Chinese theater, and it very moving, make me very emotional." I was like, "What, really? Wow, which scenes?" And he goes, "Well, the scene at end, when Greg gave me advice, because he really did that in life, and it really helped me, and he's my best friend." And I was like, "Oh, that's really sweet." And I was like, and what's the other scene?" And he goes, "It's Greg's scene." I'm like, Greg's scene, what does that mean?" He goes, "Scene where Greg in swimming pool." And I'm like, "The swimming pool scene? You're not even in that scene. He's talking to his girlfriend about like IMDb. Like, that's your favorite scene?" And he's like, "Yeah, make me very emotional." I'm like, "Why?" I'm like, "Why? Why, Tommy? Why?" And he goes, "Because, you're in swimming pool, a very happy place." I'm like, "Okay."
Beautiful.
There you
Gonna
go.
take two more questions. Who's got? Okay. Who had their hand up long enough to be? Oh, you did. Okay. It's a great question, because I was going to say that you walk a line with this, and you won't walk exactly the same line. It's really, how'd you establish that as director?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that was something, the tone and the balance of the tone was something that we thought about from the very beginning. So, it started with the book, because The Room was already a phenomenon, but without the book and knowing that story, it would just, the most you could maybe make was a spoof. But with the book, the smartest thing that Greg Sestero ever did was to get Tom Bissell to write that book with him, and they took what could have been a series of silly anecdotes and turned it into this very moving universal thing that anybody with a dream can relate to. And so we're like, that's our way in. And then the next step was like the screenwriters. We went out to Neustadter and Weber, who were not comedy writers. They were the relationship guys. They did 500 Days of Summer and Fault in Our Stars. And so by going to them, we were, showing, we were aiming for a movie about the relationship, not a movie making fun of these guys. And so our aim was always to make them sympathetic, to, yes, show all the warts and, all the craziness, but to make this a relatable story about dreamers. And so Tommy, after a while, the character of Tommy, everybody started loving it, and they, like I said, the writers were there the whole time, and they'd give me, suggestions, and we'd all want to do like Tommyisms, and it was just fun. But we ended up actually cutting out a lot of it, when it became too jokey.
Yeah,
that we had
I can imagine.
Yeah,
because you're having all the fun. You're being this
it was
outrageous
it's
character.
so fun.
And
I
you have
love telling these Tommy stories.
And you have a lot of terrific actors on there who also would love a little bit of that.
Yes, yes.
It must have been really,
yes,
really hard for you to then. Did you just let them go for it, or did you direct them on? When you're in after the scene, did you say, "Yeah, a little too much"?
Yeah, I mean, I think we knew like. What we knew was like the circumstances were always going to be funny. They would deliver. it was just that, sometimes in the improv it would just be like, oh yeah, I just want to do this one or this, and we'd try it and we'd have it in the edit and it would just be like, no, it's too
Did
too
you shoot
cute.
with multiple cameras? Did you shoot with 2 cameras at the same time, or to pick up the improv, or did you?
Sometimes, but this was actually Brandon Trost, the DP, had worked on a lot. He did the interview, and this is the end. But on this one, we shot it. It was closer to kind of what he was doing with Diary of a Teenage Girl, where for a lot of time it was just one camera, and you can see like on those like the behind the scenes, set scenes. It's this roving kind of camera, so there actually wasn't a lot of 2 camera stuff for that, but.
You just held the takes long enough to be able to improvise.
Yeah. So it was sort of this movie is sort of an amalgamation of different things that I've done and maybe Seth has done and this whole group has done, where it's definitely not an out-and-out comedy like Pineapple Express or something like that, obviously, right? But and so its spine is more of a relationship story or a love story, but we did use some techniques from we did improvise. It just worked a little differently.
Try to find the truth, perhaps. Of the
exactly. But and then as far as how I established the tone, I mean, the actors will tell you, I did stay in character on while I was directing. I mean, I asked. We were in LA last night, and I was like, we couldn't come up with another example of a movie where the director was acting in it, playing a director who's acting in his own movie, and then stayed in character. Some guy came up after me, was like, White Hunter, Black Heart, but I just feel like my guess is Eastwood did not stay in character when he was directing this. Yeah. I haven't seen that in a long time, but he's playing Houston, right? Or it's based on Houston. Yeah. And anyway, it just sort of made it easier. There were all those sort of meta levels. It just made it easier to just, and I had the prosthetics on and everything, and I think it did help the atmosphere, for the other actors who were playing the actors in the room to just stay with Tommy. And it wasn't that confusing. It was just because we were doing some scenes where we'd improvise and we'd just keep it going. And sometimes I'd say okay, let's go again or something. And then be like, is that James or Tommy? But on the other hand, there's this amazing documentary that just came out on Netflix called Jim and Andy, where it's the footage of Jim Carrey playing Andy Kaufman. Jim went so far into Andy Kaufman that Jim was gone. I couldn't do that, and I don't think it would have helped on this movie if I just James was gone and all you get is Tommy's actual direction. Tommy's direction and the auditions and stuff would be your sister lesbian, she just died, go. And you're just the fuck? That's what? I wasn't doing that. I was James giving direction, just filtered through Tommy. Yeah.
Any more questions? Oh, who was the other one? Okay, over here. Yes, please. The montage.
Yeah, it's funny. Last night at the screening at the Academy, there was 2 guys that came up to me that one had been the manager, the location manager or something at Burns and Sawyer, the rental house where Tommy bought all the stuff, and then where they actually shot, at a rental house, just a garage. And then there was another guy that had worked with Panasonic who also knew Tommy from back in the day, and they were first of all, they were yeah, we love that. You got it. That was it. That's what it was like. But they told me that Tommy, they're we loved the Talking Heads in the beginning. That not a lot of people are going to get that, but we loved it. And I was what are you talking about? And they're Tommy used to go around to the room screenings and do little interviews like that and have people talk about The Room just like that. I didn't know that. It was for us. For us, it was sort of inspired by Reds, where you had actual people talking about Reed and Sweet and Low Down, because we were actually at one point considering, they weren't always in there. We were at one point considering putting footage of actual Tommy up front, because people that didn't know The Room might look at my performance and be like, wow, Franco's really swinging for the fence and going a little over the top there with that character. And we wanted people to know, no, that's exactly what it's like. But to have real people there talking about, and real fans, all those people really love it. It's amazing to have J.J. Abrams in there, but that would sort of maybe give the impression, okay, but people didn't know, no, this is real. This is a real thing. Yeah.
Well, it's a terrific film, and you're wonderful in it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. If you'd like to hear more, you can find past episodes of The Director's Cut wherever you listen to podcasts. And stay tuned for more episodes, including Craig Gillespie's I, Tonya, Steven Spielberg's The Post, and Scott Cooper's Hostiles. Be sure to click subscribe so you won't miss an episode. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please share, and leave us a review. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.